There are definitely some decent moments in Taxi Season 2 episodes 17, 18, 19 and 20, but I'm a little disappointed, but also not. I'm kind of confused with how I feel, and I'll talk about that in a second. As always, I will discuss the episodes, so there will be spoilers from now. I won't go through everything that happens, but I'll talk about the key plot points and share some thoughts. So we start off with Season 2, Episode 17, Guess Who's Coming to Brefnish. This is directed by the wonderful James Burrows. In fact, all 4 of these episodes are directed by James Burrows. And initially, I was very, very, very excited because here we have the arrival of Carol Kane. I had no idea that her character came into it quite so early on. And then I realised who her character was, and I got a little bit disappointed. She plays a character who is from the same place as Latka, kind of, except that she's a mountain person, which is not something Latka likes, but she doesn't tell him, and they get along really well. Her character is called Simka, and the others encourage her to tell him, and she does, and she tells him and then hits him several times to get payback for all of the jokes he told her about mountain people. And the reason I'm delighted but disappointed is that I love Carol Kane. I think she's amazing, and I knew she was going to be in the show. I didn't know when. I was so excited to finally have the arrival of her character. And then I realised that she talks like Latka. And I don't think Latka is funny with his speech. I think he does a lot of funny things. He has some funny responses to situations, but obviously the way he talks, or the language and the jokes revolving around that, I never ever find funny. Maybe I will in time, who knows? But when I realised that they're probably going to go down the same road with Simka as a character, I was quite disappointed by that. So I love Carol Kane. I don't know if I'm going to love the character, but we'll see. I'll reserve judgment. I'm not sure when the character appears again, if it's immediate or if there's some time. But I was not overjoyed. At one point in the episode, we get a fun argument back and forth with Louie and Elaine. That was quite fun. And I have to say, the ending of the episode I did love, because Latka goes to talk with Simka to say it's okay that you're a mountain person, it's not going to be a problem, but she's found somebody else in what seems like a pretty short space of time. And Latka, at the very end of the episode, goes up to the bar and gets a drink and asks the bartender to put on a song. And he does. And that song is Summer Loving from Greece, which is not what I was expecting at all. And I found it to be quite amusing. I rather liked that a lot. So that certainly amused me. I did love Carol Kane in this, but I don't love her character. I'm hoping that will change in time. We then have Season 2, Episode 18, What Price Bobby? And this one's pretty interesting. We have a subplot involving Alex not being there, and everybody else worries that he's no longer going to work at the taxi company. And at the very end of the episode, he's back. And there was the explanation on, I can't remember if it's Wikipedia or IMDb, but somewhere explained that Judd Hirsch was just filming something else. He was filming a film, I think. So that's why he wasn't in the episode. I thought that was a pretty good way to get around it. I thought that was not a bad decision, and I think the subplot worked quite well. The main narrative I thought was quite fascinating. Bobby is driving the cab, and the passenger is a woman called Nora Chandless, played by Susan Sullivan, and he recognised her immediately as being this talent agent. And we have a pretty interesting exchange between them, and as he drops her off, she says she'll try and see his play, and Bobby gets irritated because he knows she's not going to, and clearly people have said this to him before, and he said, if you're not going to come, just don't. And I don't know how I feel. I don't know if I think she genuinely wasn't going to bother and she was just being polite, or if she genuinely was going to go and see it. Maybe she just felt forced into it to prove that she wasn't lying. But either way, she did go and see it. She agreed with Bobby that it wasn't a good play, but his performance was good. She wants to represent him. And this scene is not what I expected, because she calls him to her office and she says, I want to represent you. He's obviously overjoyed. And then she kisses him. And she's basically decided that they're now in some kind of romantic relationship. Maybe that's too strong a word. It was a very strange moment. She's not a likable character, but it was certainly very fascinating. And quite quickly, we learned that, yeah, he slept with her. And she then begins to mess with his self-respect. And I like the fact that they wrapped this up within this one episode. And we have a pretty fun scene where he's leaving with his self-respect. He loses that, so he tries to leave, at least with his shoes. And then she takes his shoes and he threatens to break her lamp if he doesn't get his shoes back. It was quite strange, quite bizarre. But I like the fact that they wrapped it up in one episode. But at the same time, a little emotional that Bobby seemed to have a great opportunity here. He was getting this role on Broadway. Everything was going to go really well. But at what cost? At the cost of his self-respect. So it's unfortunate that things seem to go Bobby's way and then it's ripped out from underneath him. But I do like the fact that it was contained within this one episode. And then we come to Season 2, Episode 19, Shut It Down, Part 1. And it's okay. I don't know if this needed to be 2 parts. I'll talk about the second part in a moment, of course. But in general, I don't mind it. It starts off with the cabs being in really poor condition. Nobody wants to drive them anymore because it's not safe. So they decide to go on strike. Elaine is the shop steward, and obviously with everybody on strike, Louie gets a bunch of new drivers, and they're not necessarily the best people for the job. I think they could have done a little bit more with that. I think they could have got a little bit more comedy out of that. But what we got was okay. And then we have a conversation between Louie and Alex about eternal damnation that was very well written, very well executed. And ultimately, Louie decides that he'll give the drivers what they want if Elaine goes on a date with him. And there's a bit of time where Elaine and Louie are walking back and forth, trying to negotiate, very well executed, and they're coming up with different terms for how this could work. He wants her to call him Stallion at one point, and ultimately she agrees to it. And then we come to Season 2, Episode 20, Shut It Down, Part 2, and what I love about this is Alex is such a wonderful character. He's so kind-hearted. He's so aware of other people's feelings. And he became suspicious when Elaine wasn't there and Louie seems to be getting ready for a date. And obviously with Elaine in charge of sorting out the negotiations and everybody is no longer striking because they're getting what they want, Alex was beginning to put 2 and 2 together, and he goes to see Elaine and she's drinking a lot and is clearly panicked about this. I think she's maybe overreacting because they're going to be in a public place. What's the worst that could happen? So I think maybe she's being a little over the top here, but it was still pretty funny. And then Louie arrives and he looks very smart. He's made a real effort. He looked very dapper. I thought the costume was really brilliant. And they're at the restaurant and Louie, I guess quite smartly on the one hand, but also, I don't know if it's manipulative or intelligent. He wrote down a conversation for them to have. Obviously a conversation that was very much in his favour. But at the same time, it's like he almost knew Elaine didn't want to be there. She probably wouldn't want to engage in conversation. So he took the liberty of writing it for her. Manipulative? Yes. But also practical. It got the conversation going. And then they were dancing, which I thought was very, very well executed. And Elaine still looks very, very uncomfortable. And at the end of the day, or at the end of the night, Louie takes her home, walks to her apartment. Obviously, he wants inside. She's saying no. And this is where I think Louie had some really important things to say. He ruined it, of course, in true Louie style. But I think it really showed that Elaine was being really unreasonable. Because Louie said that she might have had a good time if she just relaxed. He'd been looking forward to this. He'd clearly made an effort. And she just was so uncooperative. And as I said, I feel like she was being a bit over the top and a bit dramatic because, again, they're at a restaurant. What's the worst that's going to happen? And sure, she had to spend time with him, but from what we could see, nothing terrible happened. He wasn't really inappropriate. Elaine was being a little bit, honestly, I think a little bit cruel. I'm not saying she had to enjoy the evening, but I think she was being a little bit unfair, and Louie said all of these things, and eventually she realised that he was right. That she could have made more of an effort and that he did look forward to this and he did make the effort. and reluctantly, she gave him a quick kiss because she was feeling sorry for him, and that's what he wanted. And I thought, okay, this is fine. I don't think that was necessary, but she's clearly willing to make things up to Louie since she didn't make an effort. And at the end of the day, it was part of their negotiation. Louie was giving the drivers what they wanted in exchange for this date, and if she made no effort with the date, is she really keeping up her end of the bargain? I'd argue not. And clearly, I think she came to the same realization. She gave him this quick kiss, and this is where Louie completely ruined it. He grabbed onto her, pulled her down to the floor, and they're just rolling around back and forth. Clearly, that would have been a horrendous experience to be basically assaulted like that. And Elaine gets up, goes inside, shuts the door. And that's where Louie kind of ruined it a little bit. And obviously, they were going to end on that comedic note. I don't necessarily think that was a bad thing to end on that bit of comedy. But at the same time, because the physical comedy was brilliant, very well executed, but at the same time, I almost feel like it would have been more moving and meaningful if Louie had just got his swift kiss from Elaine and then he walked off happy. I think it would have been a nice look at this other side of his character. However, and I was thinking about this last night because I watched the episode yesterday and I didn't pick up on this at the time, but isn't he still in a relationship with Xena? I hope so. I hope we get more Rhea Perlman. But I didn't pick up on that immediately, but basically he's cheating on Xena, which is not great. So there are a lot of things that Louie does that are very, very questionable. And unfortunately, a lot of those questionable things are in this, but I also don't think that Elaine behaved as well as she could have done, or keeping up her end of the bargain as enthusiastically as she could have done. But either way, I think that it was a good episode. Do I think Shut It Down needed to be 2 parts? I think they could have done it in 1 part. I think they could have maybe taken out the scenes at the apartment with Alex. I don't hate them, but in theory, I think they could have removed those, quickened up the first part a little bit, and they could have made it into a much stronger 1 part, and then we could have had a different story for episode 20. But I don't mind it. It's not too bad. Not a favourite. I don't think Elaine behaved in the best way possible. But then again, at certain points, neither did Louie. It's almost like when Louie was behaving in a way that was reasonably admirable, Elaine really wasn't. And then when Elaine realised she has to maybe be a bit kinder, Louie was behaving in a way that's not acceptable. So we get a bit of strange balance there. It's a decent episode though. Shut It Down part 1 and 2 are not too bad. If I were to rank all of these, I guess I'd have to say I really thought the Carol Kane episode was going to be number 1, and I don't know, I'm disappointed. I guess I'm going to say What Price Bobby at the number 1 spot, and then I guess I'll say Shut It Down part 1 and 2, and then Guess Who's Coming for Brefnish. But I want to put Carol Kane, just in general, at the very top. Not a bad batch of Taxi episodes. Season 2, episodes 17, 18, 19, and 20 were pretty decent. Generally enjoyed them. Can't believe how quickly I'm getting through Season 2, and looking forward to watching the rest.